I am sitting in my quiet apartment holding a cup of coffee that has gone cold hours ago. My phone keeps buzzing on the kitchen counter, but I do not pick it up. The caller ID shows the same three names rotating Dad, Mom, Sophia. They have been calling nonstop for 2 days now, but I am not ready to hear their voices yet. A month ago, I walked out of my childhood home for what I thought might be the last time. The silence in my apartment feels different now, not lonely like it used to, but peaceful. Before I tell you how a single text message brought my entire family to their knees, let me know in the comments where you are watching from, and do not forget to hit that subscribe button, because this story will show you exactly what happens when people take your kindness for granted. My name is Lucia, and for 28 years, I believed that loving your family meant sacrificing everything for them. I work as a software engineer at a major tech company in Seattle, making a decent salary that most people my age would envy. But what they do not know is that for the past 3 years, almost 70% of my income has gone to supporting a family who never even realized where their money was coming from. Let me paint you a picture of my family. My father, Richard, is 55, a hard-working plumber whose income fluctuates with the seasons. Some months, he brings home $3,000, other months barely $1,500. My mother, Patricia, is 52 and works part-time at a local grocery store, earning about $800 monthly. Then there is my sister Sophia, 20 years old, and in her sophomore year at the University of Washington studying pre-med. Finally, my little brother Marcus, 17, and in his senior year of high school dreaming of going to college next year. I moved out of my family home 3 years ago when I got my first real job. But moving out did not mean cutting ties. Every month, without fail, I send $1,500 to help with household expenses. $800 goes to rent, $200 covers utilities, and $500 helps with groceries and daily necessities. But that is not all. I pay Sophia's entire college tuition, which amounts to $18,000 annually. I cover the family health insurance premium at $400 monthly. When Marcus needed new clothes for school or a laptop for his classes, I bought them. When the car broke down last winter, I paid for repairs. When Mom needed dental work, I covered that too. The thing is, I never told them exactly where this money came from. Whenever I sent money, I would say it was a bonus from work, or that my company had a family support program. I did not want my parents to feel embarrassed or like they were failing to provide for their children. I worked extra freelance projects late into the night, sacrificing my social life and sleep just to make sure I could support them while still covering my own expenses. But somewhere along the way, my family started taking this support for granted. Sophia would complain about tuition increases without ever wondering who was actually paying her bills. Marcus would ask me to buy him the latest iPhone, saying casually that I had plenty of money anyway. My parents never expressed gratitude for what they assumed was just good luck with my career. They stopped asking how I was doing and only called when they needed something. The breaking point started with something as simple as a broken washing machine. Last month, Mom called me on a Friday evening while I was dealing with a stressful project deadline at work. Her voice was panicked as she explained that their washing machine had completely died and they needed $800 to replace it immediately. I was exhausted having worked 12-hour days all week, but I promised to transfer the money over the weekend. Then Mom said something that stopped me cold. "You know, Lucia, this family would fall apart without your father's income. Thank God he is still healthy enough to work so hard for us." The words hit me like a slap. She had no idea that Dad's income barely covered half their monthly expenses, and that I had been the one keeping them afloat for 3 years. That conversation planted a seed of resentment that grew quickly. I started paying attention to how my family talked about money and their lives. They genuinely believed that Dad was the primary breadwinner, and that I was just a helpful daughter who occasionally contributed. The reality that I was essentially supporting 4 adults while living modestly myself had somehow become invisible to them. I decided it was time to have an honest conversation about money. I was not looking for praise or recognition. I just wanted my family to understand our actual financial situation so they could make informed decisions about their future. I wanted them to know that Sophia's education was not free, that their comfortable lifestyle was not entirely Dad's doing, and that perhaps they should show a little more appreciation for what they had. The conversation I planned to have about our family finances went wrong from the very first sentence. When I called Dad to discuss the washing machine payment, I gently mentioned that I had been contributing significantly to the household for several years. His reaction was immediate and harsh. "Lucia, do not start making up stories to make yourself sound important," he said, his voice getting louder. "I know exactly how much money comes in and out of this house. You might make decent money, but you are not supporting this family. That is my job." I tried to explain calmly, providing specific numbers about what I had been sending each month. I told him about the tuition payments, the insurance premiums, the emergency funds I had provided. But instead of listening, then he became more agitated. "You are showing off now that you have a good job," he accused. "We raised you better than to lie to your parents about money just to make yourself feel important." The conversation spiraled quickly. Dad accused me of being ungrateful for everything they had given me growing up. He said I was trying to diminish his role as the family provider. When Sophia overheard the heated discussion and joined in, she immediately took Dad's side, telling me I was being arrogant and looking down on our family because I had gotten lucky with a good career. The call ended with Dad hanging up on me, but I could not let it go. I was hurt and frustrated that my family refused to acknowledge the truth, even when I presented it clearly. So I decided to drive home to Tacoma that weekend with concrete proof of everything I had been telling them. I gathered 3 years' worth of bank statements, transfer receipts, tuition payment confirmations, and insurance documents. The evidence was overwhelming. I had contributed over $120,000 to my family's welfare since moving out. This included not just the monthly support, but also emergency funds, medical bills, car repairs, and countless other expenses I had covered without ever asking for recognition. The 2-hour drive from Seattle to my family home felt like the longest journey of my life. I was nervous but determined to clear the air. I loved my family deeply, and I needed them to understand that I was not trying to show off or diminish anyone. I just wanted honesty in our relationship. When I arrived at the house around 7 in the evening, the whole family was having dinner. The atmosphere was tense from the moment I walked in. Marcus, oblivious to the recent conflict, cheerfully asked if I had brought him a new iPhone. Sophia barely looked up from her plate and asked coldly why I was there, suggesting that I had come to show off to our parents. I sat down at the kitchen table and calmly placed all my financial documents in front of everyone. I went through each category of expense, showing exactly what I had paid and when. The monthly transfers, the tuition payments that had kept Sophia in school, the insurance premiums that had covered Mom's medical needs, the emergency funds that had saved them from eviction twice when Dad's work was slow. The numbers were undeniable. For several minutes, my family sat in complete silence, looking at proof that their comfortable life had been subsidized by their daughter and sister for 3 years. I watched their faces change as the reality sank in. Marcus looked confused and a little scared. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Sophia's expression shifted from defensive anger to shock. But Dad's reaction was the one that broke my heart. Instead of apologizing or showing any gratitude, he became even more furious. Seeing the evidence of my financial support did not humble him. It humiliated him. And that humiliation quickly turned into rage directed at me. What happened next changed everything between my family and me forever. Instead of the understanding and appreciation I had hoped for, Dad's reaction to seeing the proof of my financial support was explosive anger. He stood up from the table so quickly that his chair fell backward. His face was red with rage as he pointed at the documents spread before us. "You think this makes you some kind of hero," he shouted. "You think keeping receipts and bank statements gives you the right to make me look like a failure in front of my own family?" I tried to stay calm, explaining that I had never intended to make anyone feel bad. I just wanted them to understand the reality of our situation so we could work together as a family, but Dad was beyond reason. We raised you for 18 years. He continued, his voice getting louder with each word. We fed you, clothed, you put a roof over your head, paid for your education. Everything you have today is because of the foundation we gave you. And now you want to act like you are the one taking care of us. Sophia, still reeling from the shock of learning about my contributions, suddenly became Dad's ally again. This is exactly what I was afraid of, she said, her voice shaking. You are trying to make us feel guilty for accepting help from our own family member. You are making everything about money when it should be about love. The accusations kept coming. Dad said I was calculating and cold for keeping track of every dollar. He claimed I was trying to control the family through financial manipulation. Mom tried to interject, suggesting we all calm down and talk rationally, but Dad silenced her with a wave of his hand. You want to know the truth, Lucia? Dad's voice dropped to a dangerously low level. You have been taking from this family your entire life. Taking our love, taking our sacrifice, taking every opportunity we gave you to succeed. We invested everything in you, and now you think 3 years of writing checks makes you the family savior. Each word felt like a physical blow. I had come here hoping to build understanding, but instead I was being painted as selfish and manipulative. The financial support I had provided out of love was being reframed as some kind of power play. Then Dad said the words that would haunt me for weeks afterward. He stepped closer to me, his finger pointing directly at my face, and spoke with a venom I had never heard from him before. All you do is take. You have never given this family anything. You took our time, our energy, our money for 18 years. You took the education we struggled to pay for. You took the love and support that helped you get where you are today. And now you want credit for paying us back a fraction of what you owe. The room fell completely silent, except for Sophia's quiet sobbing. Marcus looked terrified, unsure whether to run to his room or try to defend someone. Mom sat frozen, tears streaming down her face. But Dad was not finished. His anger had reached a crescendo, and he delivered what he clearly intended to be the final blow to end this confrontation. If you have any pride left, any self-respect at all, you will pack up these ridiculous papers and get out of this house right now. Do not come back here with your self-righteous attitude and your fake generosity. We do not need your charity, and we do not need you looking down on us. The words hung in the air like poison. After 3 years of quietly sacrificing for my family's welfare, after countless nights working extra hours to make sure they were comfortable, after putting their needs before my own dreams and goals, I was being told that I had never given them anything and that I was not welcome in my own childhood home. I looked around the table at the faces of the people I loved most in the world. Sophia was crying, but nodding in agreement with Dad. Marcus looked confused and scared. Mom was reaching toward me with one hand, while the other covered her mouth in shock. And Dad stood over me, his chest heaving with righteous anger, waiting for me to apologize or argue back. Instead, I did something that surprised everyone, including myself. I calmly gathered up all the financial documents, folded them neatly, and put them back in my bag. I stood up slowly, looked each family member in the eye one last time, and walked toward the front door without saying a single word. I could hear Mom calling my name as I climbed the stairs to my old bedroom to collect a few personal items I had left behind. I could hear Sophia telling Dad that maybe he had gone too far. I could hear Marcus asking what was going to happen next, but I did not respond to any of them. I packed my things in silence, carried my bag downstairs, and walked out the front door. As I drove away from the house where I had grown up, where I had learned to love unconditionally, I made a decision that would change all of our lives forever. If my family truly believed I had never given them anything, then I would stop giving immediately. If they wanted to see what their life looked like without my fake generosity, They were about to get exactly what they asked for. The first week after leaving my family's house was the hardest of my adult life. I felt a combination of relief and devastating sadness that left me emotionally exhausted. But as the days passed, something unexpected happened. For the first time in 3 years, I had complete control over my own paycheck. I calculated that I had been sending home approximately $2,500 monthly when you included the regular support insurance payments and various emergencies I covered. Suddenly having that money available opened up possibilities I had not considered in years. I booked a solo trip to Portland, something I'd always wanted to do but could never afford. I signed up for a pottery class and a weekend hiking group. I bought myself clothes that were not on sale for the first time since college. But the most important thing I did was maintain complete silence with my family. I blocked their phone numbers, ignored their emails, and avoided all the places where I might accidentally run into them. I needed time to heal from the emotional wounds of that confrontation, and I needed them to experience the reality of their financial situation without my support. The changes in their lives started slowly. In the first week, they probably did not notice anything different, since I usually sent money at the end of each month. But as the second week arrived, the cracks began to show. The rent was due on the 15th, and for the first time in 3 years, there was no transfer from me to cover the $800 gap in their budget. Dad had to scramble to find extra work taking emergency plumbing calls at night and on weekends just to make the basic payment to their landlord. By the third week, Sophia received a notice from the university's financial office. Her account was past due, and if the $18,000 annual tuition was not paid within 10 days, she would be dropped from her classes. The family had no savings to cover this expense, and Dad's income could not possibly stretch to include university costs on top of their regular bills. The fourth week brought a medical emergency that really tested their new reality. Mom had been putting off a follow-up appointment with a specialist because they no longer had the health insurance I had been paying for. When she finally had to go to the emergency room for chest pains, they received a bill for over $2,000 that they had no way to cover. Marcus, who had been excitedly planning for senior activities and college preparations, suddenly found himself unable to participate in anything that cost money. His dreams of attending university in the fall seemed impossible without someone to help with tuition and expenses. The stress began affecting everyone's relationships with each other. Dad was working so many extra hours that he was rarely home, and when he was there, he was exhausted and irritable. Mom picked up additional shifts at the grocery store, leaving her drained and worried about her health. Sophia started looking into dropping out of school to find a job that could help support the family. A month after I had walked out of their house, my phone rang with a call from Sophia that I almost did not answer. Her number was not blocked because she had been calling from different phones, but I had been ignoring all attempts at contact. Something about the persistence of this particular call made me pick up. "Lucia." Sophia's voice was barely a whisper choked with tears. "Please, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." I remained silent, waiting to hear what she had to say. "The tuition payments," she continued, her voice breaking, "they stopped coming from the financial aid office. My advisor says there was never any special program that someone had been paying my bills directly. Why did the tuition payments stop?" For 30 seconds, I listened to my sister cry on the other end of the line. I could hear the desperation in her voice, the realization that her education was hanging by a thread, and the growing understanding that she had been wrong about who was supporting her dreams. Finally, I responded with a text message instead of speaking. I typed 7 words that summarized everything I was feeling, thought I never gave this family anything. I turned off my phone and did not turn it back on for 3 days. When I finally powered it up again, I had 47 missed calls and dozens of text messages from every member of my family, but I was not ready to engage with them yet. I needed them to fully understand what their life looked like without me before we could have any conversation about moving forward. Over the next week, the messages became increasingly desperate. Sophia begged me to help her finish the semester. Mom apologized repeatedly and asked me to come home so we could work things out. Marcus sent confused texts asking why everyone was so sad and stressed all the time. But the message that surprised me most came from Dad. After weeks of silence, he sent a single text that read, "I was wrong. Please call me." However, I was not ready to call him back. The damage from our last conversation was too deep, and I needed to see real change in how my family viewed our relationship before I could trust them with my heart again. I had learned something valuable during my month of independence. I deserved to be appreciated, not taken for granted. And until my family could acknowledge that truth, I was going to keep living my life for myself. The phone calls and messages continued, but I maintained my silence. I was no longer the daughter who would sacrifice everything to keep peace in the family. I had become a woman who knew her own worth, and I was not going back to being invisible. 3 days later, I was coming home from my pottery class when I found my entire family sitting on the steps outside my apartment building. Dad was holding a handwritten letter. Mom had clearly been crying for hours. Sophia looked like she had not slept in days, and Marcus seemed smaller and more vulnerable than I had ever seen him. When they saw me approaching, Dad stood up slowly. For the first time in my life, I saw my strong, proud father with tears streaming down his face. He walked toward me with the letter in his shaking hands, and then did something I never could have imagined. He dropped to his knees on the sidewalk in front of me. "Lucia," he whispered, his voice completely broken. "I am so sorry. I was wrong about everything. You have been the one holding this family together, and instead of thanking you, I hurt you in the worst way possible. I do not deserve your forgiveness, but I am begging you to give us a chance to make this right." Mom joined him, kneeling on the concrete and reaching for my hands. "We lost sight of who you really are," she said through her tears. "You are not just our daughter. You are our hero. You have been sacrificing your own dreams to make sure we could survive, and we never even said thank you." Sophia was crying so hard she could barely speak, but she managed to say, "You saved my education, my future, my life. I called you selfish when you were the most selfless person I knew. I am so ashamed of how I treated you." Even Marcus, who was beginning to understand the full scope of what had happened, spoke up. "I did not know Lucia. Nobody told me that you were paying for everything. I thought Dad was doing it all. I'm sorry I kept asking you for stuff without understanding what you were already doing for us." Looking down at my family, all of them kneeling on a public sidewalk, desperate for my forgiveness, I felt a complex mixture of vindication and sadness. I had wanted them to understand my value, but I had never wanted to see them suffer this much. I did not make any promises that day. I helped them to their feet and agreed to have a conversation, but I made it clear that our relationship would need to be rebuilt from the ground up, with honesty, appreciation, and respect. We talked for 4 hours in my apartment. I learned that Dad had been working himself sick, trying to replace my financial support, and that the stress had shown him exactly how much I had been contributing. Sophia had taken a part-time job to try to pay her own tuition, but realized she would need years to earn what I had been providing each semester. The whole family had gained a new perspective on sacrifice, gratitude, and what it meant to truly support each other. I did not move back home, and I did not resume the same level of financial support I had provided before. Instead, we created a new family dynamic based on mutual respect and shared responsibility. I helped with true emergencies and contributed to Sophia's education, but my parents took on more financial responsibility for their household, and everyone learned to live within more realistic means. Most importantly, I learned that setting boundaries was not about punishing people I loved. It was about teaching them to value what they had before it was gone. Sometimes the people who love you the most are also the ones who take you for granted the most, but that does not mean the relationship cannot be saved. It just means that love requires respect to survive, and respect sometimes has to be earned, rather than assumed. The greatest lesson I learned was that my worth was not determined by how much I could give to others, but by how much I valued myself. And once I started treating myself with the same care and consideration I had always shown my family, everyone else learned to value me too. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever felt taken for granted by people you love? Let me know in the comments below because I would love to hear your thoughts on family boundaries and self-respect. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more real-life stories about relationships, family, and finding your own worth. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that it is okay to put yourself first sometimes. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that you deserve to be appreciated for the love you give. Until next time, take care of yourselves first, because you cannot pour from an empty cup.